we're going to talk about changing a blade. If you're changing the blade, we need to talk about this again. First things first, safety first, unplug the saw so that there's no chance that this saw could be running while you have your hands on that blade. We need to go through the parts associated with changing a blade. I'm going to start with the worm gear saw because our presentation does. So here we have the worm gear saw. We want to talk about the Arbor Bolt. So the Arbor Bolt is on both saws, is in the same place. You can always find it in the center of the blade. That's an easy place to look for it. This bolt clamps that blade to the arbor shaft, which is attached to the motor. A good solid connection here means that the blade's going to spin true and there's not going to be any slippage or danger with that. This particular saw, or a worm gear saw, is going to have a reverse thread on the bolts, which means it's going to wind in the opposite direction of what you would be used to. So when you're trying to loosen this, keep this direction in mind. The blade lock is typically on a saw on the other side of the saw. So on this worm gear saw, the blade lock is right here. This is a button that's going to push into a small place in the motor that is going to hold that motor still so we can loosen the arbor bolt. Without using the blade lock, it's very difficult to get the bolt loose to change the blade. Blade arbors are different on certain saws. There's a couple different styles to talk about. One is going to be circular, as you see here. One is going to be a diamond-shaped one. Some saws have a diamond-shaped arbor knockout, and a blade is going to come with an option it's going to come circular, and you can knock it out to make it a diamond shape. So first things first, we need to make sure that this saw is unplugged, right? So we need to lock the motor so that the arbor bolt can be loosened, but we need a tool to loosen the arbor bolt. Most saws store their tool on the saw. This particular saw has the bolt in the handle here. So this is a hex key that fits into the handle. It's there whenever I need it. So now we need to lock the motor, pushing the button in and turning that motor until it's locked in. So right now I'm holding pressure on the button and it's found its spot in the motor and I can no longer rotate the blade. So now I'm going to put the key into the arbor bolt and I need to turn it. This one needs to be loosened in a clockwise direction. So as I turn it this way, it's going to loosen the bolt. And we're going to wind that bolt all the way out. We need to remove it. And at some point that bolt's going to come loose. I'll put that over here. There's also going to be a wide washer that fits over the blade. This is going to help clamp the blade to the shaft. At this point we've removed the bolt and the washer, and now we can remove the blade. So the blade comes out, we're ready to put a new blade in. Now we need to talk about blade direction. So the blade has to go on the saw in a specific orientation. Most saws, I would say all saws, have an arrow on them that indicate blade direction. As you can see on this saw, the arrow points in that direction. So this is the rotation of the blade. Every blade is marked with the direction that it should go on the saw. So we've located our arrow here. On the back side of this blade we have an arrow. So I need to make sure that I get the blade rotated in the same direction. So as I'm looking at this arrow, it is traveling in the same direction as that arrow. So now I can move my blade guard out of the way and put my blade on. It fits over this arbor shaft. Now we're ready to put the washer, the wide washer, back on. And this washer has a couple of flat sides. It can only go on in one position. Now we're ready to put the arbor bolt in. Remember that tightening this arbor bolt is now in the counterclockwise direction. It feels backwards to me, but I know that's what works. So I'm winding it in by hand until it cinches up tight. Then I'm going to pull out my wrench, and I have to now set my motor lock again. Make sure that it's locking into the correct place on the motor. And when it finds that spot, the motor won't turn anymore. Now I need to tighten as hard as I can this arbor bolt up until there's no more movement in it. A good thing to do, once you get it tight, you're going to release your motor lock. You can spin that blade now just to make sure that it seems like it's turning flat and true. You will notice if it's wobbling or anything strange. The next thing we're going to need to do is when we plug this in, we need to test it before we actually make a cut to make sure that we have mounted that blade straight, there's no wobble in it, and that it is set up ready to go for a cut. So let's change the blade on a direct drive saw. Same similar procedure, find the tool. This tool happens to be mounted in the base plate. This is more of a wrench, like a closed end wrench. So we locate our Arbor Bolt, and we need to find our motor lock or blade lock. This button here is our blade lock on this particular saw. So we're going to press the blade lock and then turn the motor until it locks in. While I'm keeping pressure on that blade lock button, I can now loosen this Arbor Bolt. I'm going to turn this in a typical counterclockwise direction, which will loosen the bolt. I'm going to wind that bolt out. I'm going to pull the washer off that's clamping the blade. I can now remove the blade. We're going to pull the right blade in, looking for the direction of the blade stamped on the tool. As you can see, it's supposed to spin in that direction. I see my arrows on my blade. So now I'm going to put my new blade in around my arbor shaft. We now put our washer on, and now we put our bolt on, and we're going to tighten it up, hand tighten it. We then need to lock our motor again and make sure it's not spinning. It's going to lock in right about there. Now we can tighten this bolt until it's nice and tight. We're going to do the same thing, spin it by hand to make sure it's turning freely and that there's nothing weird going on. We will then test it by turning it on. After it's plugged in, then we can make our cut. Don't forget, your tool to loosen your arbor nut needs to go back into the base plate on this saw so it's ready for you next time you need it. This video is a production of Trade Skills U, all rights reserved. If you provide instruction in the construction trades and have a need for videos like these, please contact us at tradeskillsu.com.